All right, so this one is going to be this show is going to be about Virginia. What we're going to do is we're going to cover Virginia. So last show was the big bad wild wild west of Wyoming, and what are we going to call Virginia?
It's the East Coast version of the Wild West.
The East Coast version of the Wild Wild West. I feel like I should have spent some time trying to figure out what we're going to nickname it so it's entertaining. But let's get to the meat and potatoes of it. So
I would have to say that Virginia is maybe the least entertaining state in the country when it comes to tows, because I don't believe there's a state in the country that the tow companies have their claws more in with the authorities and with government than any other state that we work with.
Right. So let's kick off the show with that, because I think that's a good place to start. So when we were talking about Wyoming and we were saying the Wild Wild West, what we were referring to is the fact that reason we called it the Wild Wild West is because there was no sheriff in town. Right. There was nobody really regulating. I mean, there was, but it wasn't regulated the way it really needed to be. The regulation wasn't tight. In this state, it's the opposite. The regulation is there. It's just the tow companies have hooks in what the regulators are doing.
Right, and the regulations are actually on
Pro-tow.
behalf of the tow. So when you're talking about regulations to prices, it's the same thing as Wyoming. There's no regulating body enforces any type of standard for what they can charge for equipment or labor or anything else regarding a recovery, whether that be charging by the pound or a rotator, which its average price is about $1,000 an hour more than any part of the country where the rates are actually regulated.
Got it. So let's go ahead, and I'm going to let you open. So let's just start off with exactly what if we were going to give our viewers exactly what they needed to know, right, about Virginia. And you were just going to, you were sitting down with someone and they're about to start, being an adjuster or a trucking company that's going to do a lot of work in the state of Virginia. What would you let them know about tow?
All right, so there's a few different aspects to Virginia. The first thing I guess that I would want them to know is protection is key, right? So when we go back, or we're referring to how the tow companies have their claws within the government and the regulatory bodies in Virginia, the protection aspect of that is huge, because one of the things that they're allowed to do in Virginia, and one of the things that increases or inflates the bill almost automatically on behalf of the tow company, is the fact that the tow company gets dispatched. There's 4 hours during the morning and 4 hours during the afternoon that they consider high traffic hours. So if that recovery is performed on the highway, the tow company is dispatched. They bring any and every piece of equipment that they possibly can. They deem whether or not the equipment has to be removed for the highway to operate safely. And if the traffic is allowed to move without the recovery being performed, which in most cases, unless it's a serious incident or blocking all lanes, they're going to put pause on the tow company, and the tow company is on standby for 4 hours while they're charging the insurance company for every piece of equipment that's part of that recovery.
Right, so let's run that back really quick for anyone that missed that. So in other words, what we're talking about is they have these high traffic hours. What did you say the time was on that?
So you have to...
It depends. Okay,
it
that's
just
fine.
depends.
That's fine. That's fine.
Correct.
But there's 4 hours of high traffic hours. If the accident occurs in any time right before that, right after that, or during those hours, what's going to end up happening is they're going to get paused, right? The police department's going to tell the tow company. First off, tow company's going to bring everything out.
Correct.
Right? Once they bring everything out, all their equipment, right? So we're talking about tens of thousands of dollars worth of equipment right off the gate, right? They're going to bring it out, and then what's going to end up happening is the police department's going to tell them, just hang tight until we're out of this high surge of traffic.
Correct.
Right? The tow company's going to have all their stuff sitting there, and they're going to be charging the bill, right? So the bill is going to be increasing for every hour that is sitting there on the side of the road during this high traffic time.
Correct.
And why do they send all of the equipment out?
Well, that's obvious. So if
Yeah.
I'm getting 4 free hours,
Well, let's not tell them the real reason. Let's tell
Okay.
them the reason they're going to tell us.
all right,
What's the
so
reason they're going to tell us?
They're
that
going to
doing it?
say, and believe it or not, this is a common practice in probably every state, but Virginia is going to be more specific to this, but it's safety.
Safety.
Right, so if I'm during a high traffic period of time, especially in the morning, and I get put on pause, and then I have a 3 to 4 hour window that's considered non-rush hour, then I have to have everything out there to get the recovery performed efficiently and the roadway cleared before the next rush begins.
Right. So in other words, these guys are going to basically go out, and then and now we're talking about rates that are already inflated.
Correct.
And now, so you have rotator rates, you have truck, you have lowboy rates, you have labor rates, everything's already upticked, right? And then now you're going to add these rush hour times that are just going to basically take an already upticked per piece charge, and then now you just let it sit on the side of the road, which is basically your first point of inflation. And this point of inflation, correct me if I'm wrong, if you call the regulatory body to argue those hours, that's probably the hardest hours to argue, because they're going to almost they're going to side with them, right?
Yeah, there's no discussion.
Yeah, no discussion. They're going
Right.
to actually say exactly what the tow company is going to say, which is, hey, this was high traffic hours. They had to be on the side of the road.
Correct.
Right.
And so that's where we get into the protection portion of this, because it is crucial when you're adjusting that you know whether or not all those pieces of equipment were A, necessary, and B, used.
Right.
Right? So if you're in a situation, especially in Virginia, where you can see rotator rates as high as $2,500 an hour.
Right. Compared to what? What is that compared to? What? Tell me a reasonable rate.
A reasonable rate, in a state that it's regulated, it's under 1,000.
Yep.
You might see, rates pushing the high end. For some states that give a little bit more leeway, 1,250. Virginia, you're talking about a starting rate, a company that is being reasonable in Virginia at 1,500.
Yeah. Wow. Right. Okay. So then, all right. So now, what else would we cover with these guys in Virginia? What else do they need to know?
Okay, so protection, right? And you want to be able to present everything that you've put together to the tow company to give them reason to reduce the bill, and you can't do that on the belief that the bill's inflated.
Right.
So you have to have all of your facts together, which is why I'm gonna probably say the word protection,
Right.
1,000 times during this interview. But the key point here is they do not have to negotiate with you.
Right.
Virginia is not a state where there's going to be repercussions to the tow company.
And they all know it.
And they all know it. So having your facts straight, having your presentation be very clear and down to the point is going to be key, because you're trying to mediate something where it doesn't hold any value to the company that's on the other side of the mediation.
Right. And the reality of the situation is let's flip ourselves to the tow side for a second. If you get a phone call from an adjuster and you're talking to someone, even if the bill is inflated, it's offensive that the adjuster or the carrier or the broker or anybody that's calling you would even suggest that it's offensive without real facts, because that's where the tow companies start to feel like even though they're taking advantage of you, they start feeling like you're trying to take advantage of them, which all it does is rise emotions, it pisses people off, and then next thing you know, you're in a battle, you're in a fight back and forth with the tow company, and you're basically telling these people that they need to take a cut in their rate, and you have no real reason why. So on that, I want to cover something real quick for our listeners, and most of you guys are probably already figured this out, but if you go to our page, right, if you go to our Abusive Tow Authority page or our Abusive Tow Bill page, it's abusivetowbill.com or abusivetowauthority.com, or you go into our LinkedIn pages, right, there's going to be a link in there that's going to allow people to go and use our hotline. Right, and the hotline is basically a place where they could submit their tow information. They don't have to assign the information to us. right? They could just submit it to our office. We're going to review the bill for them, and then at that point in time, we're going to give them information as to what the points of concerns are for free. It's all free. We're not gonna charge them anything, but that's what allows them to go back to the tow company from an informed position with real information. And everybody that's watching this should use that, because it's a free service. You're basically getting real advice, right, by tow analysts and tow experts. You may get Jamie sometimes, but most likely not, because he has a big team. You're probably going to get somebody else, but we'll give you the points, we'll tell you what you got to do, and then you're going to take that information and then you can use it in the tow company. With a state like Virginia, I always do tell the clients, and I think you probably advise them the same way. If you're a really, really good negotiator and like you have it really, really down and you feel confident about that, then go ahead and fight your fight and we'll give you the information. But if you're even questioning that you're quasi, or you're not really, like, you don't really want tough confrontation, or it's just really you'd rather someone else deal with it, don't even go into that fight, because when you walk into that fight with the tow company, they're going to smell that, and when they smell it, it's over, right? Because I've seen this thousands of times. And then the problem is that when you get into that fight with them and then they smell that, and then you throw in the towel and try to, like, back in like wrestling days where you go and tap your tag us in, man, and then we get into it, it's a nightmare. It changes the recovery, it changes the mediation time, it changes everything, right?
Right, and there's a few things going on. So, and I'm sure we're going to cover Maryland down the road, but Maryland, the insurance industry's already lost that battle. Mm-hmm. But right now, there's several states, Virginia being one of them, that there's an underlying issue occurring, and there's a battle that's going on. And in a state where the tow industry has these giant hooks already into the meat and potatoes of legislation, then the battle becomes more immense. So we're talking about the fact that they're trying to place all liability for an incident or recovery solely on the liability holder.
Okay, so let's go deep into that. So explain what that means. Like, pretend like you're talking to, my daughter Athena. Okay. How would you walk it? How would you walk it?
So just from a standpoint of history.
Yep.
There was at one point in time, and you're going to hear this as an adjuster a lot when dealing with the tow company, that they were called out on the TRIP program. And they're going to tell you that the TRIP program, they have to bring out a certain amount of equipment, they have to perform the recovery in a certain amount of time, environmental issues, safety issues, right? And it's all based on this TRIP program. But that's truly not the case. There are no requirements for the TRIP program. There are no minimum equipment or safety issues. The only thing that they have is they have to respond within a certain period of time, and they're expected to perform the recovery efficiently, mm-hmm. and they're judged by the state on that. So initially, when we would reach out to the state and we could touch base with the project managers for the TRIP program, and they would do an evaluation, because the tow companies do have to send in timestamps for the equipment, and the state knows how long they were out on the scene, and we would be able to verify those hours billed against what the timestamps for the equipment. And at one point in time, they would actually get involved in helping with the reduction of the invoice itself. Well, now the tow companies have created such a stink where the state is not going to get themselves in a situation where they could be held liable for anything dealing with the tow company against their own program, that they'll spend the time to check the hours, and you can have an accurate reflection of what's being billed. But we had a situation earlier, and I hate to say this, but the tow company refused to negotiate with us. Their sole argument was that they continued to bill for everything up until the last man goes onto the yard. The equipment was used for an hour and a half. They did a site remediation. The last person came on the yard 5 hours later. They billed for the rotators that had been sitting and approved to dispatch by the trip program 3.5 hours prior.
Right.
And they continue to bill through. A year ago, even 6 months ago, the state would have actually stepped in and said, hey, you need to work with us.
Right.
They no longer do that. And that's because the tow industry and their representatives are representing the tow companies better than the insurance industry, which to this point in time does not have representation outside of the Truckers Association.
Right.
And our office and my staff specifically doesn't believe that that's fair representation, because the trucking industry, while it does have concerns and legitimate issues that they would have with tows, they're ultimately not responsible for paying the invoice.
And they don't really. Sorry for interrupting your show, but I need to hit you with this. If you have not already gone to abusivetowauthority.com or abusivetowbill.com, get there. If you get there, what you're going to get is you're going to get links to our hotline. So if you have any tow issues, you can actually contact our office for free. We'll evaluate the bill for free, and we'll give you advice for free. You'll actually get expert advice on a moment's notice. It only takes us a couple minutes to respond to you. You have access to all of our educational platforms where we go state by state by state, showing you what you need to know about a state. So if you're running into a problem, you can go to the education platform, pop up a video, look at it, and you're good to go, and you'll know exactly what you need to do, exactly what the laws are. So again, if you haven't gone there, abusivetowauthority.com or abusivetowbill.com. Back to the show. And they don't really care about the insurance part of it, because that's not really their interest. And although the insurance, and a lot of times people don't make the correlation that if the insurance is getting hit with much more expenses, the premiums increase, which then trickle down to the trucker anyway, but people don't make that correlation. So it's just too far-fetched. And this is why why we're taking such a stance now on going after the government officials, and why we're creating that position, because the reality of the situation is that because the insurance industry doesn't have the proper representation, and not even the trucking industry has the proper representation, not even just the carriers, just the brokers, right? It's brokers, carriers, everybody. We're going after them for everybody, but this is why we're attacking the government officials, because we understand that when we go into those fights, we're able to make moves, and we're able to actually get them to pay attention to this. Because like on that trip program situation, the reality of the situation is like on that one where the tow company, and I'm familiar with that one, if the tow company, because the tow company didn't want to negotiate with us, but there's another part of it that we didn't cover, which is that there was so much time involved, and when we say a long time in our world, anything over 5 days is a long time, right? So we had already put too much time behind it, and our client didn't want us to really take it to the real fight, which is a common issue we have. Because if our client if the client in that situation, not to blame the client, because the client obviously has things they have to do, and they have to protect their expense, and they have to protect their time frames and things like that, but if the client would have allowed us to act, we would have went right over the trip to whoever's regulating trip. We would have attacked them and started putting pressure in other areas. But the problem is that takes time. And anytime you add additional time to a claim, that's where we run into problems. And this is the challenge that we run into. And we talk about you and I talk about this all the time. Wouldn't it be beautiful if we could get the truck, the carrier, the broker, and the insurance company all on the same page and allow us to actually fight the fight that we want? We could probably get rid of this tow issue in 3 months. Right. I mean, if there was a way where we could move a magic wand and go, okay, everybody get on the same page, and they would all allow us the time that we need to execute, we would be able to set such a precedence in that time because of how many tows we get coming through the door, that we would be able to go, at least half the country, we would be able to at least start causing the fires necessary. But unfortunately, the divide and conquer is real in this situation, and nobody's on the same page, and everybody has their own interests, so it does limit what the fight is. And this is why the tow industry, instead of this being snuffed out in 90 days, this has gone on for 3 or 4 decades.
Right. And in a situation like Virginia and a lot of states around the country, but our topic today is Virginia, you're in a situation too where to go through the proper legal process does not benefit our client.
Right.
So if they choose to stand,
unless it's a precedent.
Correct.
Right.
But
that's
as far as a legal standpoint, right? You're talking about filing for a writ of repleblin. Mm-hmm. They're incurring storage costs throughout that time until the equipment's released, and then you're talking about the legal fees and everything else involved. So there's different ways to attack, and in the situation that we're discussing right now, I don't believe that our clients finished with what they're going to do on their end.
They just wanted to resolve the claim.
Correct. We're putting together though the different avenues that they can go to maybe push this further down the road. One of the avenues would be for any adjuster out there that has any circumstances dealing with any state, but especially Virginia, because this is a situation where there is a more dire situation, given the fact that the tow companies are really about to hand it to the insurance industry if they're able to pass legislation where one carrier or one insurance company is reliable for the entire recovery, and then forced in a situation where they got to subrogate against other insurance companies or their carrier to get paid for the portion that they weren't liable.
Right.
And that is flood the Attorney General office with these issues, because if the Attorney General's office is not seeing these complaints, they don't know that there's an issue. And unfortunately enough, if I'm Joe Schmo driving in my car, a tow company pulls my car from a piece of public property, and there's some issues with the manner in which they did that, I'm a citizen of Virginia, and the state's naturally going to feel necessary to protect me more so than a carrier whose driver's out of California and the company's out of Michigan. And so there's a huge disconnect in what the states actually know is an issue.
Right, which is why the legislation went past so easily, because there's a bigger, louder bark on the other side with the tow industry than there is here. Because again, this goes back to the divide and conquer, right, guys? So I wrote down here on my list is that claim by claim battle versus precedence, which is the war, right?
Right.
The challenge is like right now, like when you were saying, well, in this particular case, it wasn't really in their best interest to do it on a claim by claim basis. It was not, right?
Right.
Because on that particular claim, if you look at the claim on an individual basis, based on just mitigating that claim, which I'm not going to say it's wrong to do that on the insurance world, because that's what the insurance industry is built on, right? You gotta deal with each claim as they go, and then in the overall, you tally up your profits in the back end, and then that's how it breaks down, right? But this, I'm pointing out, and again, I'm not blaming anybody, because it's not anybody's necessarily their fault. Everybody just has different interests, and one of the things you and I talk about all the time is precedence versus the claim by claim fight, because the way to solve this problem in this country is precedence, right? And we're starting this by educating, right? Because our whole thing is getting in there with people and explaining to them, because most people don't even know that there's these two battles. They just think it's claim by claim. So we're educating, which hopefully over time leads to precedence. But the reality of the circumstances is that these two battles are very, very different. And the one that actually solves it at the root is not being fought almost at all, which is why this just keeps happening, which is going back to the request you just made to all the adjusters watching this, even the truckers too, the carriers too, guys. I mean, if you're a carrier and you're watching this and you're thinking, well, this is all insurance. No, your premium, you see that payment that you make on your truck, your trailer, and all that stuff every single month, that's a result of this. They pay more money out on the tows as an overall combined, right? You're going to get those premium increases, and that's where you're going to see 5 years from now, whatever you're looking at your premiums at right now, expect this is where inflation comes from. This is where these numbers start to increase, right? Well, the other thing is that I want to go back really quick, because I feel like we just tapped on the liability. Let's get into what they're trying to pass with the liability, and let's get a little deeper in that, because I think a lot of people are going to miss the correlation of the fact that you're going to basically be able to put all of the weight on the shoulder of one insurance carrier.
Yep.
And that's going to be under the liability coverage in Virginia, right?
Yes.
Right. It's going to go under the liability coverage in Virginia. And then what's going to end up happening is they're going to be required by the regulatory body, meaning that if this is not legislation, now the tow company and the tow attorneys can push this button. Right? They call the regulatory body, they call the Department of Insurance, they go, here it is, right? Now you're forced to pay out that bill, and then the liability coverage is now forced to subrogate with all the other coverages to get their portion if that's what they're going to do. And we all know on the subrogation side that's not always an easy scenario. I mean, there's going to be a lot of lost dollars, a lot of lost profits in that.
Right, and there's a couple key points. So we see this in Maryland, and it's a complete disaster because if you regulate one side of the industry, the insurance industry, right, but then don't regulate the prices that the tow industry is charging, well, now if I always have a fallback, right, if I always know if there's liability, and everybody knows in the country, right, the largest policy that any carrier is going to have is the liability policy. And so the tow company has no reason to mediate. They don't have any reason to worry about whether they're getting paid or to keep their prices in line with other tow companies in the surrounding area. It's just a situation where they know they're going to get paid. Doesn't matter if the carrier's an owner-operator, that's his only truck and trailer, they got it in their yard, they're not going to get any money from him, but if there's a liability policy, then they're covered.
Right.
And the situation that you run into with legislation is each and every state's going to design it a certain way, and so we don't know yet, because this is in the beginning process of a battle, you know, if that's going to what that's going to look like. Like if they have a liability policy, the driver wasn't insured, but the liability policy still has to cover the recovery, right? Because Virginia is a state that is really out there to protect the tow companies. And I just want to kind of bring this back around a little bit, but the reason that is, we're talking about an industry that I believe our stats for last year was about $4 billion in excessive tow bills.
Right.
You know, that came at the expense of the insurance industry. That's revenue to the state that's passing the legislation. The state doesn't see revenue from the carriers. Right. It's not something that they can assess. It's not a number that they can rely on, right? They know the numbers from the tow industry. They know the revenue that they're bringing in.
And they're taxing it.
And they're taxing it, right? So it's a situation that's truly set up to provide the tow companies all the ammunition that they need. So when you're getting into a potential legislation to cover these unpaid recoveries that are performed under the state TRIP program, right? That's lost revenue to the state. That's all the state's going to see it as.
And for those people, that are sitting there going, well, hell, the insurance company makes profits and that's taxed too. Well, yeah, in what state?
Right.
In what state is it taxed?
Right.
Because it depends on where that umbrella's at and where it all goes and all these different things. So it's one of those scenarios where it's like, you know, everything is really, and I don't want to say by design, but let's just say by default or by accident or whatever. Everything is laid out, right, in the tow company's favor, and it's become such a culture, and it's such a uniform culture, right? So like when you take the battle between the tow industry, which is a unified front, right, pretty much across the board,
Right.
and not to say that they're all, congregating together, although there's a lot of them that do. But then you take the transportation industry, which is so diverse, right? You're talking brokers, you're talking carriers, you're talking insurance brokers, you're talking insurance agents, you're talking insurance. I mean, when you start going into that, and everybody has their own interest, and oftentimes, I mean, hell, they're fighting within each other. I mean, look, listen, we started in this, right? You know, a big part of this, and I talk about this in other videos with, and a lot of you guys that know me know that our primary business originally was mediation and litigation on B2B contractual obligations, right? We used to, we do collections, we do mediation, we do investigations. Non-consensual tow fell on our lap on accident 6 years ago, and then we just took it and ran with it, and we've been blowing it up since. But how many times? I mean, we used to represent brokers against carriers against brokers. It's like everybody's fight. We used to represent brokers against insurance companies against brokers. I mean, it's a big battle. So not only is it divide and conquer in the sense that people are not on the same page, but oftentimes they're battling each other. And the tow company lets the storm brew into this perfect storm, right? And then they just come in with an easy solution. Just someone pay the bill and it all goes away.
Right.
And then boom, and then someone pays the bill. It's like old mafia stuff. It's like being in the freaking the mafia, right? It's like it's like, hey, listen, do you want to pay me $3,000 a month to protect your shop, or do you want your shop just to get burned down somewhere? Not to say it's going to get burned down, but it might get burned down tomorrow at 7:00.
Right. And the problem is that the tow companies have something tangible.
Yeah.
Right. So they can show recoveries that were unpaid. They can show the state the loss of their own revenue, the loss of revenue that the state didn't get, and then the protection for them is the fact that they're running and operating under a state program.
Right.
So these are all things that are tangible, and when we're dealing with the insurance world, those numbers can't come to light. You can't generate a report that shows in a state how much bills were inflated because the state doesn't regulate the charges.
Right.
They don't tell them that they can't charge for 3 rotators, 2 heavy wreckers, the 35 laborers that they had out there while one person's out there with a shovel remediating a site and putting grass seed down, right? That's not something that you can present. So the argument comes from a different standpoint, and it automatically is putting the insurance industry, these carriers, truck drivers, behind the 8 ball. And the other thing is, when you were discussing about the tow company owners and being on one solid front, you have to understand these companies are family-owned businesses. A majority of the counties, cities, states that we work in, 80% of the companies are offsprings from other family members, owned by the children of the original tow owner. So they're established. They're established within the market. They're established within the city. They're established within the states.
Right. They're more put together.
So I've never, other than the weather industry, where apparently you can be right 50% of the time and still keep your job, right?
Yeah.
You're not going to find an industry where you can look at Google reviews, you can look at complaints with the states, you can look at issues that they've had with regards to being sued, and they're all negative, yet the company's operating and everything's fine.
Right. Sorry for interrupting your show, but I need to hit you with this. If you have not already gone to abusivetowauthority.com or abusivetowbill.com, get there. If you get there, what you're going to get is you're going to get links to our hotline. So if you have any tow issues, you can actually contact our office for free. We'll evaluate the bill for free, and we'll give you advice for free. You'll actually get expert advice at a moment's notice. It only takes us a couple minutes to respond to you. You have access to all of our educational platforms where we go state by state by state, showing you what you need to know about a state. So if you're running into a problem, you can go to the education platform, pop up a video, look at it, and you're good to go, and you'll know exactly what you need to do, exactly what the laws are. So again, if you haven't gone there, abusivetowauthority.com or abusivetowbill.com. Back to the show. Let's talk about what these guys can do proactively. Let's talk about, what can a carrier do proactively, or what have you seen a carrier do proactively that's actually helped us on the back end with mediation, litigation, or what have you seen them do that may have put them in a better position, again, right up front?
Okay, so, and this is true with all states.
Okay.
This is not just subject to the state of Virginia, and I believe we've covered this before. I'll probably cover it,
forever, right?
Ever and ever. But the key is in the way that you protect yourself, and the idea with accident protection, right? Going out there, taking the pictures, taking pictures of the party that hit you, where their vehicle is, right? Well, it goes the same way with tows, right? You set all of that up during the accident.
Pretend the tow company is part of the accident.
You train your driver. You have them fill out reports. You force them to take pictures of the scene, and that's to protect against liability if it comes to suit.
Right.
So the same can be said for
build
recovery.
Build the case
you
before
build
it
the
happens.
case. So you take pictures. if I am able to take pictures of equipment not being used, of 15 people standing on the side of the road while 2 people are working, take pictures of whether or not you have the Department of Transportation doing traffic control or the tow company doing traffic control, right? It's all relative to what they can charge, because even in a state without regulations and a state unwilling to really step up to the table and put the tow company in check, the threat's always going to be there that you're going to set precedents and you're going to involve that tow company in litigation. And if you do have everything put together solidly enough, that's going to be the biggest argument, because no tow company attorney wants to go to court to fight this battle, because the more that we can get it out there, the more that you are on top of things, and the more information that you could then slide over to public knowledge, right, through freedom of information. And that we've done that in prior states as well. And then put that to the forefront of the citizens and the government and the state. The tow industry is going to have regulations come down the line. I mean, that started 5 years ago with Wyoming, and unfortunately enough, it's taken 5 years and we haven't gotten to the legislative process, but they recognized they had an issue, and the only way that they can recognize that they have an issue is if you're pointing these things out.
Absolutely.
So it protects you just like the scene of an accident through litigation, and it also is going to be your strongest argument with the mediation portion, because there's a will, right? And whoever has the stronger will in a mediation is going to be the party that comes out ahead.
Right.
And part of having that strong will is knowing that you're right.
Right, and most of the attorneys that we meet, they're not litigators. They're backdoor negotiators, and if they see that they got a losing case, they don't want to be on the back end of a losing case. No. So the first thing they're going to do is you're going to get your attorney to start. The opposing counsel will start selling the tow company on why they need to just accept. So here's the other thing is that, one thing that I see, and I'm sure you probably agree with me here, is like one thing that I see all the time with the carrier and the trucking company is that there's a disconnect even within the trucking company oftentimes, especially if you have an owner that's not an owner operator, right? You have an organization and they have carriers out there, or maybe having carriers go in to take over loads or so on and so forth. However they're going to handle it. There's a disconnect within the organization in the sense that the owner of the business is the one that's going to feel the premium hit, the premium increase, but they're not spending the time to educate the carrier that may not, the carrier gets in a car accident, they're wound up, right? They just got in a car accident. There's a lot of emotion going on. They're scattered. They're not thinking, right? So, and a lot of times, and not to say that not all of them are, because a lot of experienced ones aren't going to be freaking out like that. But ultimately, it's up to the owner of the business to come and educate them on these strategies that you're saying, as far as taking these pictures and all these things. Because without it being prompted, it's most likely not going to happen. And this is the difference. And with caps and things like that on insurance policies, how many times do we see something just pay to the limit, and then all of a sudden the owner of the truck company, the owner of the truck, goes back and goes, well, I thought my insurance was going to cover it, and all of a sudden they get stuck with $30,000 of an $80,000 bill. Right. And they're like, well, what the hell? Right? Well, if your driver was doing what they needed to do up front, right, and they could have actually helped mitigate that, then you would have been able to maybe lose that $30,000 off the back end of it, put yourself in a better position, so on and so forth.
Right, and the thing that I'm going to make very clear to everybody that's watching is the fact that the tow company's always going to have pictures of the work. The tow company's always going to take those pictures at a moment in time when every piece of equipment's being used, when every person's doing what they're supposed to be doing, when laborers are carrying boxes, right? Unfortunately enough, probably about 80% of all of the claims that we deal with, the pictures that are presented to us are from the tow company.
Yeah, right.
And so you can't argue properly when it's a one-sided deal. So
all you could say is that wasn't the whole story, and then they're going to say, "Great, show
Right.
me," and then you're out.
then you're in a situation once again. So you're behind the eight ball with the legislation. You're behind the eight ball with the authorities. Now you haven't trained the driver properly.
Preparations behind the eight ball
Right?
now.
They have a phone. They have access to freely video what's going on.
Yep.
You don't have to video 8 hours of recovery.
Yeah.
You can video what they did initially on the scene, how
Yep.
many pieces of equipment were sitting to the side, how many workers were standing around watching.
Yep.
When they get into it, you can stop the video if you notice something going on that doesn't seem right. Click that video back
Yep.
on.
And that's a massive proactive measure. The clients that we've seen that do that, they actually, when they're able to train their staff, that they have less issues, because what ends up happening is the tow company's watching it too. They're watching you, watching them. And when they start seeing that all of a sudden you're walking up to each tow spot and you're taking a picture and you're recording the deal, and they see you with a cell phone, they've watched the news, they know what time it is, they know what's happening, right? And you have to believe that the laborer or the supervisor is calling back down to headquarters, letting them know, like, hey, they're watching us, they're recording it, this and this and that. There's going to be communication within there, which that alone could shave $30,000 off of potential inflation right off the bat without even seeing the inflation, because you just did the right things up front. It's the same concept of you're being recorded when you walk into a store.
Right, and that happens before they even hit enter on the invoice.
Yep.
So it's a situation that you call it preventative maintenance, but it prevents it to even coming to our office.
Right.
And then the other aspect of that is, as a tow owner, as a company owner, with video, and I mean everybody's seen it in their city or state, right? News stations put companies in check.
Right.
So what does a video tell you? I've never had a tow company unwilling to negotiate or mediate an invoice with video, and there's a reason for that.
Yep.
You blast it on the news. State officials have to answer
And the news
to a video,
love
right?
tow
The
companies.
news
They love
would
tow stars.
they would obliterate them.
Yeah, right.
But we just don't have video that comes through that often, and it's a shame, because you're talking about an industry that's kind of moved to the dashboard cam. You're talking about every driver has a cell phone. They probably have 2 or 3
Yep.
cell phones that have the capability of putting together a half-hour video of what's going on, and if they took the time to do that, if the driver actually stayed on scene, one of the other biggest issues that you have is the driver leaves the scene. So now I have the tow company out there doing work. You're relying on officers that are in a state that are tow friendly.
Right, and they
Right?
don't.
They know these companies. They work with these companies. It's the same thing when you're talking about a third party adjuster. And I'm not trying to throw shade on third party adjusters, but the difference between the adjuster that's actually handling the claim for the insurance company and the third-party adjuster is they're local to that area. They work with that tow company. They might have been out on 3 recoveries that week with that tow company, right?
We've seen that tons of times.
They're going to
you're
lean-
talking. You get. I mean,
Yep.
how many times have we seen a in-house adjuster tell us, "Hey, go ahead, go reach out to the adjuster, the on-site adjuster, or the independent adjuster."
Yep.
We call the independent adjuster, and they're worse of an adversary. I mean, they're literally fighting us as much as the tow company is, or they're backing the tow company, because on Friday night, you're in a small town. I went to high school with him, right? So it's one of those things where this gets really ugly. It gets really ugly. I mean, it just brought me, even saying that reminded me of the issues we had were in small towns where the tow owner is married to the freaking governor's daughter.
Yep.
And all of a sudden, it's like you're in the middle of this thing, and it's like there's no play. I mean, it gets really ugly in some places for sure.
It does, and like I said, the only person that is going to really be affected is the party that has the least control.
Right.
So, when you're talking about third-party adjusters or officers on the scene, we go back, our team interviews all of these people. We put together the entire story before we even touch base with the tow company. We're going to have all of our ducks in a row. We're going to know the timeline. We're going to understand what they're billing and what they're not billing. But you don't get accurate information from people that have to work with the company on a daily basis. And unfortunately enough, that's independent adjusters, and that's the officers that call them out. So, to rely on that rather than train your drivers to shoot a video, to take pictures of inconsistencies that they see, to take the time to ask the driver of the rotator that you're watching unload boxes from the trailer, if they're doing that as a laborer or the driver, because you're going to get charged for both.
Yeah. That's
right.
A good
It's something very simple that you can just ask, and it's probably going to lead the tow company to think twice when they go to double charge the laborer and the owner operator.
Right. So the owner operator, we're charging 10 hours for an owner operator and 10 hours for a laborer, and there was one person out there.
Right.
And you're like, well, what? Well, how did that happen? We see that all the time.
It's common practice.
Yeah, it's common practice, right? So it reminds me of that movie, Are We There Yet? The one with Ice Cube, where the guy, did you ever see that, where the guy puts on the different hats?
No.
Oh, it's hilarious. You gotta see that. The guy puts on, like, when he's the electrician, and then he takes off the electrician hat, and he puts on the insurance hat, and he puts on the real estate hat. It's all the same guy. Anyway, so let's go back to Virginia really quick. Actually, before we go to Virginia, let's talk about the adjuster. Let's talk about the insurance broker, the person that's on the insurance side of it. What could they be doing from the point when they see a claim? What things? And it's tough because they're reactionary, right? They're dealing with it after the fact. But what could they do to put themselves in a better situation? And I know it probably has to do with the first initial communication with the tow company, absolutely.
So, and I'm not trying to be arrogant here, and I'm not trying to say, hey, the Abusive Tow Authority is your only avenue, but I have done a lot of thinking since our last show, and I'm just going to put this out there because when our team receives a tow, and we normally resolve these issues between 3 to 6 days, right? 6 days is just at the absolute extreme, unless there's circumstances with other insurance companies involved and trying to get them to make payment. But we spend on average 40 man hours on a tow.
Right. Yep.
What adjuster who's got 30, 40 claims that they're managing has the opportunity or the time to spend that kind of man hours on a claim? They don't have the staff. They're a single party trying to work this. They're trying to identify if it's inflated or not, right? And I believe during our last episode we discussed the fact that we're seeing more inflation on $20,000 invoices than we ever have. So you're dealing with a situation, once again, that doesn't work very well on behalf of the individual that's responsible. And as an adjuster, your productivity is based on mitigating the losses to the insurance company, right?
Right.
But if you don't have the time to accurately go through each and every invoice, you're at a disadvantage. And you can see, even with our staff and all the people we have working for us, there becomes a point in time when you're dealing with too many tows where you're like almost off the edge of a cliff.
Well, I was just talking to someone about it, because in order for us to be effective, we have a very specific process.
Right.
And us reconstructing the bill and us paying attention to the laws and getting it in front of a mediator or a director of litigation or attorney to look at the laws in the venue, and looking at our past notes to figure out what happened on the last one and what issues we're running into, looking at all the notes on that tow company to see what happened on every situation we dealt with them, because a lot of them we've dealt with several times.
Right.
It takes a whole lot of time. That's why the average person on a tow is 5 people, because you cannot do it oftentimes with just one person, and that's where the struggle is. And that goes back to that hotline, though, Jamie.
And you're talking 5 people on our end.
Right. Right.
But to properly do it, I mean, if you're actually vetting an invoice, if you're vetting it the way that we vet an invoice, so you're talking about 5 people on our staff,
Right.
but we're talking about the officers on the scene,
Yep.
owners of the tow company, the drivers, the project managers,
interviews,
whoever's
all
in
that,
charge,
right. Yeah,
right?
very true.
It's all encompassing, and then on the other side of that, we're putting together that data, right? So
Right.
we're collecting data on the legislation, things that are happening in the state, contacts as they change, people that are in charge of specific programs that are going to benefit the team to get the mediation done. And so with that being said, and the fact that, you know, we have the luxury of just being specifically involved in that portion, I don't see how a company or an insurance agency would be able to fight that battle properly. And so what you're talking about happening then is a couple invoices here or there, they get red flagged just because they're so abusive, and then the adjuster's going to focus naturally on those, right?
Yep.
And then they're processing the other claims,
Right.
and there's no telling, even, you know, when we're pulling statistics, what
the real inflation
actual
number is.
inflation
Yeah,
is.
because most of these adjusters, I was just talking to a conversation with somebody the other day where I was having a conversation with them about the fact that, you know, a $20,000-$30,000 bill comes across the desk, you just stroke the check. I mean, it doesn't, it's not even if it's inflated by 100%, if the bill's supposed to be 10 grand, 7 grand, and it comes across your desk at 20, and you're an adjuster used to seeing 50, 60, 70, 80,
Right.
you think you're getting a kiss, you think you're getting a favor, right? You stroke the check, you move on, and there is hundreds of claims going through that, like that all the time. So the inflation again, like you said, I mean, it becomes, it's really crazy. And then in addition to that, you get a pencil whip phone call, right? You get a pencil whip mediation, because what happens is the adjuster on scene or the adjuster not on scene necessarily, but the adjuster handling the claim it has all this stuff going on, and they look at it, they go, man, that bill looks inflated. I think one time, I think if I remember right, we dealt with this before, we've had a similar tow like this in a different state, and this is way more. They pick up the phone with that type of conversation, and the tow company just swallows them.
Yep.
They're like, what?
And
then all of a sudden they start firing off, because the tow companies now, they're educated on the law. They're like, well, you must not understand how Virginia works, do you? Yeah, you had one like that in California. This ain't California, son.
Well,
And all of a sudden you're in one of those battles.
the tow company is gonna, and this is how big this has snowballed.
Yeah.
Right, in the last 6 years. So when you brought me on board,
Yeah.
30,000 was unheard of.
Yeah, it was crazy.
That's all we saw. Like
Yeah.
anything over 30K
Was a bet.
It got sent to
Yeah.
us because they're like, what is this? Right,
Right.
now, 30,000. It's
Normal.
just human nature to think it's normal, and so
We're getting more
if
$100,000 plus bills than ever before.
if you've paid a claim at 30,000, the next time you see that 30,000, right,
Yep.
you automatically just believe that that's good.
Yep.
And it goes beyond that, because the tow company, almost every phone call that we get involved in when we're dealing with the mediation is going to tell us about an invoice that some other insurance company just paid 2 days ago,
Yep.
where they did all the exact
First
same
thing they say.
things.
First thing they say.
Yep. And
I got one right
they're
here.
going to name drop, and they're going to say, hey, such and such an insurance company had no problem with this bill. Do you want to see it?
Yeah.
And that doesn't reflect reality.
Yep.
Right? It's just a game of smoke and mirrors, and you become numb, and people don't make these challenges. And so how deep-rooted this issue is, even for our staff and our company who's fighting the battle every day,
Yeah.
we don't truly have a real understanding, because we don't know for every invoice that's sent to us and that we get a $30,000 reduction, or a $20,000 invoice that was actually only $7,000 and gets paid. How many out there that just got paid,
Right.
that are the same value where nobody knew?
Right, and precedent starts to become set, because that's where it's at. And let's not be confused about going into the legal precedents. how many legal cases have we been into where the tow company is able to come in and produce those documents? They're able to go, judge, I mean, look, I mean, here's a stack of bills that this is how I bill all the time. What are you talking about? Everybody pays it like this. These guys are just being ridiculous. They're trying to bend us over. They brought in the Abusive Tow Authority. The Abusive Tow Authority, everybody knows in the tow industry, they're just bullies. They just try to force us to get reductions. I'm just trying to make a living for my family, and these guys just come in and they try to beat me up. But here's the proof. And then we have to fight the other side of it, showing like, well, that one was inflated, that one was inflated. Well, thanks for showing it to us, because as we really go deep into this, all of these are inflated.
And
right.
We actually won a case like that. I believe it took 2.5 years to finalize, but in that situation, it was even brought to our attention that our client had paid a previous invoice very similar to the same tow company, and that was brought up in court. So it's a situation, like I said, where it has to start with the driver. And it has to work its way all the way back to the people cutting the check, and until there's uniformity like you have on the tow side, we'll never really truly understand what it's costing the industry. And to some degree, and I make people aware of this all the time, but those premium hikes, that's not just for carriers. You and I who are just driving our normal personal vehicle around are affected by the amount of claims, or the total sum of claims that the insurance industry's paying out. And the only people that are really profiting from this are the tow companies and the attorneys.
And that's it. So let's start wrapping this one up real quick. Is there anything else in Virginia that these guys need to cover that we absolutely didn't cover yet, or do you think we got a pretty good?
I think that we got a pretty good idea of how to best cover yourself in Virginia. I hope everybody watching, takes the time, whether you're an adjuster, to let your clients know, you're the owner of a carrier, owner-operator, that it starts with the driver. It starts with any and everything that you can put together at the scene. It ends with staying through the recovery. If the tow company tells you they're going to be out there a second day, that takes the work and effort for you to contact your insurance company to find out if they're going to send a adjuster out there. If they tell you that they don't have one available, to actually get somebody out there as a carrier. This can save you hundreds of thousands of dollars, even if you only have a handful of trucks out on the road. Some of the larger carriers, you're talking hundreds of millions of dollars, right? And either claims or premiums. So in states that the tow industry already has a leg up, education is going to be the true way to protect yourself. And then through education, you move that process along, as we did in Wyoming, to educating the people that are involved in making the decisions with the state. And because you get enough heat through the people you've educated on the bottom. They create the heat, which creates a listening ear on regulation. Then we're able to pierce that a little bit better. All right, guys. So we're gonna go to wrap this up, but I wanna do a quick little shout out and reminder to everybody. So if you're not on the Abusive Tow Authority, the ATA LinkedIn page, get on it. We're posting educational content on a regular basis on that page. LinkedIn is going to be our primary platform along with YouTube. If you jump in, if you're not in the ATA or Abusive Tow Authority forum group on LinkedIn, the group on LinkedIn, not the page, the group, join the group. The group is a forum. It's for the transportation community. It's designed to allow you to basically join. You can join in there. We're going to have, anytime you have a tow issue, you can go in there and put your problem in the forum. Other people in the community, whether it's other adjusters or carriers or brokers or whoever, is going to respond and have conversation in there and tell you what their experiences are. So we're, again, educating and trading information. And then one of Jamie's people are going to be in there answering questions and helping out with live situations. So again, Abusive Tow Authority LinkedIn page, the Abusive Tow Authority forum.
The last one is visit our page, guys. Go to the abusivetowauthority.com or the abusivetowbill.com, and you can get a brochure right then and there, get our information, and that way you know all of our stuff, and you can get more details on how we work, just so you have it in your back pocket. So yeah, get on those social media platforms, get educated, and then do not forget the hotline, guys. If you have a problem, if you have a tow you're running into right now, don't try to eyeball it. Okay, it takes 1 hour. Go to the website. There's a little button on there that says, submit a tow for hotline, or ask for a representative to call us. I don't know exactly what it says, but you'll find it. It's very easy to read. You submit a little form. It's going to go right to Jamie's team. You're going to get someone that calls you ASAP, and they're going to give you some information. They're going to walk you through what's going on in the bill. They're going to talk to you about the things that you need to contest. And then if you right then and there decide, you know what, this is too much for me to handle. I don't have the 40 hours to handle this. I don't have the 10 hours to go back and forth. I don't want to deal with the nonsense. Submit it out, shoot it out for a real submission, and we'll attack that.
And can I add one more thing? So, as a favor to yourselves and to us, I'd like to also say that these are information fact-finding sites. Mm-hmm. And so obviously from an adjuster's point of view, you're not going to be able to name the tow company, just as we're not able to because of legal ramifications in doing such a thing. But I would love to see examples. If you're an owner operator or a carrier and you're not worried about actually naming the tow company themselves, like letting people know that tow company is having issues billing in a certain area, what those issues are. Like the more we share, it goes back to knowledge is power, but also it allows us to stay on top of an ever-changing world. So with the amount of invoices that we're seeing on a daily basis, I believe that we have a good grasp for every area in the country, but that doesn't mean fire is not going to start over here or a fire
something
over there.
New, some new tactics, some new strategy.
So the more that we put out there, the more we can help each other. Through educating ourselves and designating these hot spots and the issues for certain areas in the country, the better prepared that everybody's going to be to fight this battle. And it is a battle, it is a war, and if we're not fighting it and choose not to, if you lay down, it's going to hurt the public as a whole.
Yep, for sure. All right, guys, so that's a wrap.